You never know. I know. So things are good. What happened in Wisconsin lately, but that's all right.
Morning, everyone. Let's see, today is the Wednesday, July 16th meeting of the Planning, Resource and Development Committee. Looks like we have a quorum. Supervisor Morehouse is not here, but not online either. Otherwise, we have a quorum. Approval of the minutes from our June 18th meeting. Motion. And a second. Any discussion or questions about the minutes? All in favor or approval, say aye. Opposed, say no. Minutes are approved. So we have these days we're having two potential opportunities for public comment, right? So if there's any general public comment about anything particular that the public would like to address the committee on, that's appropriate. And I guess then also if there are any,
Tom, we did receive
do.
one public comment by email.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I'll put it up on the screen here, blow it up a little bit so everybody can see it. So this public comment was received on Sunday, July 13th, from Terry Nichols by email. Public comments. In a DNR report in 2023, related to the quantity of groundwater used, Dunn County made the top 10. Dunn County was number 7 in the quantity of groundwater used. This was groundwater used for irrigation purposes. Does this beg the question of when are there enough high-capacity wells in Dunn County? Who makes that decision? With the extreme weather events this country is experiencing, what are the priorities relating to groundwater if this area experiences a long drought? Crops or people? The spreading of human septage on farmland sounds like the county's hands are tied if the county cannot have a stricter ordinance than the state. Is this a priority for the county's legislative committee? It's my opinion that people in Wisconsin take water for granted. If you live in the western states, it would be a different story. Yet, Wisconsin is facing PFAS, the forever chemicals, and nitrate levels in groundwater that aren't good for seniors like myself and infants. In a recent listening session held by Senator Smith at the Menominee Library, a question came up relating to groundwater, and a gentleman, 2 seats from me, stated his nitrate level for his well was 18 parts per million. 10 parts per million is the upper limit. I asked him, "What did you do?" He replied, $2,000. He doesn't have the funds yet. Respectfully, Terry Nichols, Town of Colfax.
Thank you. Thanks, Terry, for the comments. I guess the other thing is we're in the process of the comprehensive plan and farmland preservation plan update. We are inviting any ongoing comments from the public about that process. Do we have anyone who wants to share? Okay. Then we'll move on. We have no public hearing today. And this is the time for staff reports. Register of Deeds, Heather.
Good morning. So this is our June monthly update. Seems so long ago already. Much busier on the real estate side. We recorded 603 documents compared to January, which was 332 documents. A lot more ownership transfers, 174 ownership transfers. So yeah, a little more money for the general fund for June. And then we did have I have 2 full-time employees now. Lori Schneider's hours were increased from 30 hours to full-time status June 2nd. And I also gave a presentation to the Dunn County Genealogical Society at the Russell Rosbach Museum, just providing resources that are available through our office and how to access records. And then we did switch credit card vendors from Allpaid to VPS. VPS is the one that's used by a lot of the departments in the county where we were using all paid, but our minimum service fee went up to $3.99. And VPS was offering a 95-cent service fee, so that was appealing. But we've had some complications with this switch over, so working through that. And I guess that's all I have.
Any questions for Heather? Anyone? Thanks, as always, Heather.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. So my report is on screen here for display. You can see during the month of June, there were 9 certified survey maps submitted to the county for review. Elk Mound led the way with 5 new parcels being created. That involved around 53 acres, and you can see the other totals there. Quite typical for this time of year. It's busy time of year. 17 maps a survey came in for review and filing. We worked on 24 public land survey system corners in various townships. And I attended a steering committee meeting for our ERP system and also a priority-based budget meeting. One thing I didn't include in the report that I should have is we purchased a robotic total station. So it's a piece of surveying equipment that turns or measures angles and distances and allows one operator to use that equipment. It basically takes the place of an employee, right? And it turns the angles, measures the distances. You control it through a interface that you walk around with. And so we're learning to use that, and it's a wonderful piece of equipment, and we think it's going to greatly increase our efficiency and work well with our current staffing levels. So other than that, my financial report is attached here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Carlson?
How much did that little robot cost?
The robot itself, so I just want to clarify, it's not like a typical robot, that has a human appearance. It's a piece of equipment that that can, yeah. It looks no different than most serving equipment. So that robotic total station itself was around 19,000
Wow.
for that piece of equipment. When you think of the cost of an employee though, with fringe benefits and, the robot doesn't call in sick. The robot, doesn't need to take a day off work or talk back to you or complain or, those.
Yeah.
I don't want to make it sound that way.
Yeah.
But yes, we feel it was a pricey piece of equipment in the long term though. That return on investment, I think is there certainly.
Sounds
So,
like it.
yeah,
Neat.
thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can you beat to the robot? How far away can you be from the robot and still have it work?
So each one has its own specs. The one we purchased, our vendor told us we could be around 1,600 feet away, which is quite a
Yep.
ways. A half mile would be 2,640. So it's more than a quarter mile, but less than a half a mile. And typically, we are not that far away from it. So the instrument still works as a manual instrument. So if I want to stand behind it and run it, I certainly can. But it provides us extreme flexibility. One person can go out and be up to 1,600 feet away from it. And it actually tracks you, follows you.
Ah.
It'll even follow you if you go behind an object, as long as you keep walking at a constant rate of speed. It just keeps turning until it locks onto you again. There's a prism on a pole that it actually tracks, a glass prism. So as long as that isn't broken, I mean, obviously if you're in traffic and a bus stops in between you for an extended period of time, it's going to lose you. So, but a lot of firms are going with this type of instrument. So, yeah.
So how did when you had just or 2 people working, what angle were you trying to check all the time?
Well, everything we do involves angles and distances and points on the ground. So everything we do, we have to measure angles, measure distances. Typically 2 people do that. There's an instrument person and then a rod person. One person walks around with the rod, and this robot basically does the work of that instrument person. Once you get it set up and calibrated and a baseline established, it turns all the angles off of that by tracking you. So
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay. Thanks, Tom. Tammy.
All right, good morning. Yes, here's just kind of our standard update. As you know, as you expect this time of year, we're pretty busy. Unique situation where we have actually 3 duplexes proposed in a structure that's being renovated in Downsville. So it's a unique situation where they found a way to work with the building code, 1 and 2 family dwelling building code instead of commercial building code, and are going to construct 3 duplexes inside an existing structure. So looking forward to see how that project plays out. And it's a perfect situation for Downsville where there's sewer and water. So that's a really nice project, and hopefully to report some good things on that one coming up. As far as our, again, staff tracking, we have 1 staff who kind of keeps a beat and track of phone calls, emails, and I mean, kind of down this last month in June, but still, 83 emails is still significant enough for 1 staff to be handling. As far as ADUs, we did receive 2 ADU related inquiries. It's hard to say if they will actually go forward. It's looking like they might be better off rezoning first. One's in a GA where we don't have density, so they will likely have to rezone to an R2 district in order to have that ADU. Conditional use permits, again, a variance that was granted, that would be the town of Weston where that was approved. And then again, conditional use for the non-farm. We see a lot of resistance for that. Most landowners want to go the route of rezoning versus having to go through the conditional use permit. Can explain why, and maybe it's more just transparent going to a zoning district than having to go through that conditional use where there's kind of that question of what does that mean long term, that guarantee versus going to a rezoning to a different district. Code enforcement, 2 sanitary related cases this last month. And then just on to our comprehensive plan. We're starting to receive surveys back. We're down to 6 townships now who are still waiting to send that initial survey back to us. So if the board members know anyone in those districts, please reach out to them, or in those townships, please reach out to them. And then obviously this was a June or July activity, but we did have those the farmland owner surveys went out. So that was just shy of 1,400 direct mailings for that farmer survey. And then I'm happy to report that we did onboard 2 new staff end of June. So we have an enforcement officer planner, Max Richards, who we were able to steal from Green Lake County. And then we also have Tyler Ming, who is our new zoning specialist. And then I'm just going to, not on the report, but also provide the board with our committee with an update that Tracy Albrightson did put her resignation in. And so Friday will be her last day. So if the board has a chance to reach out to her, and she's had just over 3 years with Dunn County this go around. So it's a big loss, but she's got a great opportunity ahead of her, and we wish her all the best. So that's my update.
Sorry to hear Tracy's there. That's, any questions? Monica, go ahead.
I've been following this action in city council involving an annexation and rezone of some land in Red Cedar from agricultural to industrial. It's 300 acres. Have you been involved in that at all?
I have not. When it comes to annexations in the townships, that's pretty much held. Well, honestly, it's really between the landowners and the city typically.
Mhm.
The township and the county usually are out of it at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Another topic, the conditional use considerations. How do you view that in terms of, you mentioned that people are concerned about long-term viability or potential, I guess, whether it's a secure a situation as rezone. How do you view that?
Approach that I've taken for the two non-farm that we've had this year is recording an affidavit against the property, against the deed that will hopefully reassure that that use has been through that process. We also require a map of survey. So there's a mechanism, I think, in place to help reassure that, the landowners that there is longevity to it. It's always that, additionally though, it's that restriction of, I only get non-farm use for 1 acre, for example. And what does that mean for code enforcement, if they go beyond that, boundary? And we haven't gotten to that point of having to go enforce or verify whether someone's, going beyond for example, 1 acre.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions? Okay. Chase, you're on.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, in our report for this past month, included a number of things. One thing to point out with our conservation compliance stuff that we're continuing to work through, some of those larger grants I mentioned and you approved, and as well as county board, the budget adjustments for that notice of discharge grant for a particular farm. We're still navigating that. As you can imagine, we're talking about people's livelihoods and what the impact that is for their portion of these cost share funds. So typically, in that particular grant, it's $880,000. That's roughly 70% of what that cost is. So the 30% that landowner has to incur. And so they're working through that on their end, which, creates a lot of time and energy to go into to meet a successful project. We're hopeful that we have another grant coming through here soon for a targeted runoff management grant on a different farm that will help address potential contamination in groundwater. Producer-led watershed groups, in this month's report, I included a number of dollars in there to look at where we are at sitting wise for incentives that are paid out through those grants and through those producers. Heather Wood's with us today in our office. She's involved in these groups to some degree as it pertains to the implementation of multi-discharge or variance funds. So I did not include that in the report, but some of the participants in these producer-led watershed groups are leveraging funds through other sources. So the MDV program, we've been able to kind of shore up or address a number of long-standing resource concerns with the pooling of these funds. So it's been a long time coming, but successful projects. Some numbers there and data on some of our technical projects. Heather's here as well to answer any questions on our groundwater monitoring program, but that's been going for a couple of weeks now, but we're getting sample results back. The public health department lab and Amy is keeping up and doing a good job there as well. And the last two things, the land application of septage is another agenda item following our report here. And this is basically a follow-up to, I guess, public comments that have been brought before this committee in the past regarding the spreading of human septage and our duty to follow up on that. And we can describe that more in detail on that agenda item. And then the last thing is my two predecessors before me, Jim Forrester, the original county conservationist, and members of the Dunn County Alliance of Conservation and Sports Clubs, started the Sharing Our Resources fishing event for those people that are with disabilities or unable to live on their own. We bring them down to Mahnomen, Lake Mahnomen and Point Comfort Park. And since 1993 have done an annual event taking these individuals out on the lake, fishing or just for a boat ride. So we've been a part of that from the get-go and still continue to support that where we can. The Alliance is the main sponsor for that, but this year was a good turnout. and I've been told in all the years it's never rained on this day. So I guess I'd be happy to answer any other questions you have. And like I said, the land spreading of septage, we'll talk about more in a little bit.
Any other questions? Mike?
Yeah, thank you. I have several. First off, on the state budget, I saw that 50% deal.
Yes.
Are we really covered now?
So we're not covered by the full statute. So the full statute says 170, 50, and 50 for every position after the third. So with the state budget being approved the way it is, we will receive 100% of the first position, 70% of the second position, and 50% of a third position. Because we have more staff in our office, we won't get the full funding of that formula. But it's very good news. This has never happened before since this formula has been in existence, at least since 2006, I believe. So over almost 20 years. The other part of this is that the original request was for increase to the base funding for this grant to go statewide, and that was not approved. So this is one-time funding in each year of the biennium. So in 2 years, we'll do it all over again.
Okay, thank you. And who's collecting the water samples, Heather? This time around?
As usual, our delightful intern funded by the Dunn County Conservation Alliance is happily out collecting water samples and making friends with the dogs of Dunn County. So
So there must be some stories behind that, I guess.
every day.
Yeah, okay,
Chase is trying to get us to write a book about it as a collection of these events.
okay. And finally, Chase, you didn't blow your own horn a little bit, but he's involved in so many other activities. You're a co-chair of, what's the name of that most recent one?
Yeah, I'm so since 2018, there's been a health and conservation working group throughout the state. So I kind of brought that with me when I came to Dunn County, but I was co-chair of that group that formed. And that was to address basically resource concerns that directly impact public health. So that's why it's a health and conservation group. In the last year, it's turned into an official committee of the Wisconsin Land and Water Conservation Association. So I've just kind of continued in that capacity. So, but yeah, you may see emails go out because you're a land conservation committee member when we have those committee meetings, notifications of those meetings, and Supervisor Kinnear jumped on that and participated in a meeting. So I appreciate that. But yeah, Jeff Robb with Public Health here at Dunn County is also a participant in that. We have a pretty good collection across the state that we get together and share ideas and I guess build on resources for things that impact public health and natural resources. And the biggest one is typically groundwater in the last few years, nitrates, PFAS, and just trying to build a shared understanding of how our two local departments but statewide associations can work together to move things forward and learn from each other.
We do appreciate, I know you're on other committees also, Chase, so thank you.
Thanks.
May I?
Yeah,
I think I probably know the answer to this, but I want to keep asking about the annexation and rezone. So for the committee, this is about 350 acres of prime farmland in Red Cedar. And the proposal is to rezone it and turn it into a data center. I understand that there can be some water impacts with data centers. Is that anything that your department has been asked about or?
We have not been asked about it or involved. In fact, I didn't even know that it was happening, to be honest with you. So maybe that's my fault, but yeah, no one's approached us for any of that.
There haven't really been any conversations, or not very many conversations with the county about it. I guess it's being seen as a city-only issue, and that's bothering me, and that's why I'm bringing it up. Thank you.
okay, anything else? All right, thanks,
Okay,
Chase.
thank you.
Septage land application, groundwater ad hoc committee recommendation review, something we do occasionally.
Yeah, I thought it was time to kind of touch base on that again, given the topics of the septage and groundwater monitoring and having Heather here with us today as well. So as I normally do, I put the recommendations and the kind of the progress to date report in the packet. Tried to highlight a few things. It's not all inclusive. Certainly as I reread it this morning, I feel like I missed a couple things. So I'll try to get that updated. But Certainly, we've been talking off and on a little bit about the topic of establishing a county initiative to support agriculture diversity as an economic development and water quality strategy. So on page 2 of that report is kind of some, I guess, an update. So we've talked about the efforts behind what's dubbed as the Red Cedar Learning Hub. This is an effort through a number of partners, not only agency partners, but also university staff through Stout, through Madison, and through Grassland 2.0. So that's looking at how rotational grazing of livestock can impact the landscape and ultimately water quality, while also at the same time providing some economic opportunities. And there's been a big grant application that was submitted for a federal grant, could have brought several $1 million into the state, and that was not awarded. So the Red Cedar Learning Hub has kind of taken a few steps back, but my understanding is that it will continue to move forward. But that's kind of where we were putting our energy to address some of these recommendations. Just trying to focus in an area rather than being spread thin, because it's a broad topic. The other one there is I try to give an update every year on nutrient management plan coverage. That was a recommendation by the Groundwater Ad Hoc Committee. We've had conversations in the past about the reality of achieving 100% coverage of nutrient management plans. And even if we could, I think the focus where we try to spend our time is about nutrient management planning quality and not just quantity. So we could have coverage, people can turn in a checklist to us and say they have a nutrient management plan, but is there actual implementation behind that? And we're trying to continue to work and balance that out. The reality is, like we've mentioned before, if we were to cost share our way to 100% coverage, based on the cost share rates that we receive right now and the amount of funding per year, it could take close to 300 years. So it's just not realistic to think of it like that. But with that said, we have leveraged, been working pretty hard on getting additional funding into the county in the last few years. We've spent all of the money that we have available already, and actually looking at opportunities to obtain funds from other counties that are not using them. So we'll continue to do that. We have landowners that are interested, but certainly nutrient management planning is a bigger onion than just getting cost share and getting a plan in place. So, and I would mention too on that topic, the agricultural census for the number of acres of cropland in the county has changed, every time a census is done. So prior to 2022 ag census, we had, I don't know if I have the number in here right now, we had less cropland acres than we do now. I'm not sure how that necessarily works, but I'd have to look into that closer. But the reality then is the number of acres that we have checklists turned in for having a nutrient management plan, and that percentage is, actually went down because we have more acres apparently in the county for cropland. So is there some clearing of new land potentially? I'm not really sure what all goes in behind that ag census to determine those actual acres, but if we're basing our percentages of nutrient management plan coverage off of that, and that number gets bigger, then we need to have a more rapid rate of plans coming in, and we're not seeing that. So it might look like our percentages are plateauing or maybe even have gone down over the last few years, but that is one of the main reasons. We're still getting around 65 to 68,000 acres of nutrient management plans turned into our office every year. And we've always said that, that's just what's turned into us. We believe that there are other, farmers are doing nutrient management. The price of fertilizer is not conducive to it's not allowing people to just waste fertilizer, right? They're not just going to put it out as a cheap insurance because it costs money. So there is nutrient management planning happening to some level, but meeting the formal Conservation Practice Standard 590 that's required in our ordinance, that's recognized across the state. Those are the plans that we receive in our office and receive checklists for. So that's what we're documenting here. And that's the work that we have ahead of us still. On the grazing front, there is the Promote a Farmer-Led Rotational Grazing Initiative as one of the recommendations. So we're looking at page 3 now, and that's just wanted to highlight, and I mentioned this in the previous staff reports about some of the work that's being done through our producer-led watershed groups as it pertains to grazing. We have specific grant funding through the Nature Conservancy that's going to support actual grazing setups and getting the landowners involved in that, which has a profound impact on water quality long term. But there's a few events coming up on that. And I think that might be the last. Oh, other than our groundwater private well monitoring program continues. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or address any other areas you see you'd like to spend more time on.
Any questions? Chase, are the grazing events at all available to the public?
Yes, they are. Yep.
And how would people find out about that?
So part of it would be through Wisconsin Farmers Union and their social media. There's some connection there. I believe those flyers have been and will be again posted on our county's Facebook page. I can double check on that. Otherwise, it's been distributed through various networks that we have.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to septic disposal fact sheet.
Okay, so I'll start out and then I'll let Heather kind of talk about some of the details. But if you recall, some time ago, Neil Cook, citizen of Dunn County, came and provided some public comments several times, also writing articles in the paper across the state with concerns about spreading of human septage and its impact on groundwater. And certainly those are serious topics and ones that we, I think historically through our department have talked about, not only through the livestock operations study group, but certainly groundwater ad hoc recommendations. There's notes in there about getting a handle on where land application of septage is occurring. And, part of our follow-up after a previous meeting here, we reached out to the Department of Natural Resources, individuals that directly oversee and are in tune with this topic to learn more. I recruited Heather in our office to participate in that to help understand this. And then she followed up and was able to produce this fact sheet. And we've vetted this through DNR. They're okay with this being public. But I think it's important to keep it simple. That's why it's a 2-page thing, and just try to get to the point of some of the concerns that may have been brought up in the past. So I'll have Heather kind of go through the document, and then we can kind of dig down deeper on some of the stuff if you'd like. But Heather, you want to?
So like Chase said, the goal of this was to kind of lay out some of the basic facts of this issue. There's definitely some concerns that have been expressed, and so we wanted to kind of reach a mutual understanding before we actually start discussing the issues. The first part is just what is happening specifically in Dunn County from a numbers standpoint. The septic systems and holding tank numbers come straight from our friends over in zoning, and working through all of that. The 5,700 sites from DNR, as well as all of the numbers after the site specifics, come from the DNR, the staff person there who is in charge of doing the site approvals. I currently have a list occupying my computer that has all of those sites listed out and where they are. We have about 130 sites that are approved for use throughout the county, but in 2024, only 19 of those sites were actually used. So that's just kind of to give a concept of scale of how it's being used. And then we have kind of the table there just explaining how many acres there are being spread on and how many gallons are being spread. Now, second section, I tried to condense about 25 pages of state code into about a page and a half. And so this is by no means all encompassing of the state code. There is 3 main codes that govern this particular issue. Chapter 281 kind of outlines the legal authorities, and then NR 113 outlines the specifics of actually applying it to the land. The other one is NR 114, and that's just the licensing requirements for people who do the spreading, so your pumpers and applicators. So that one, I didn't go too deeply into 281 or NR 114 because the main bread and butter that we're concerned with is going to be found in NR 113. Now, the Cliff Notes version of 113 is that it really depends. From the local governance aspect, it is one of the few codes that I have worked with in this line of work that is actually quite black and white. It explicitly states that no local government can create any restrictions that are more restrictive than the ones at the state. The counties can take up the management and application and whatnot themselves if they'd like, but anything that we put forward would have to be identical to the state regulations. So they're pretty explicit in that. Now, as far as the actual application of the septage, there's the general site requirements, which is where a lot of the conversation has been had. And that's going to be when you hear about, the infiltration rate or I think percolation. There we go. That's the word. Percolation is the word that's very frequently used. And that's just how quickly the water moves through the soil. And so that's definitely part of how DNR staff decide whether or not a site is going to be approved. But there's a lot more to it than just that. So if a site doesn't meet that initial filtration of, okay, it is too fast of a percolation rate, then we go into, okay, well, how much water can it hold? And so there's a few different layers that you have to get into before we can just kick a site out as not being eligible. There's also some regulations that depend on how the septage is actually applied to the land. So if you're just spreading it on, so just putting it on the surface of the land, the requirements are going to be a little bit more restrictive than if you're injecting it into the soil, which will kind of hold it in place a little bit better. So the requirements change a little bit based on what you're doing and how you're doing it. And for applicators, before a site is approved, they have to have all of this stuff fleshed out in a plan that they submit to the DNR before they're allowed to do it. So that's kind of the summary of where we're at with NR 113. From the county end of things, we in Land and Water, we work within primarily NR 151, which is the agricultural prohibitions and standards for the state. The restrictions and land spreading of septage aren't explicitly called out in NR 151, but Chase was mentioning the 590 standard and whatnot for nutrient management. That standard does not call out any difference between commercial fertilizer, manure, or human septage. So it should still be getting worked into any farmer's nutrient management plan and considered a nutrient that they're applying to the ground. So that kind of goes into what we're already doing and work that we're already working with farmers to make sure they're adequately accounting for the nutrients that they're putting out there. So I think that's about it. Happy to answer any questions.
And I would, if I could, just follow up with, so when we started the kind of the investigation process into this, I mentioned that meeting that we had with DNR. We did invite Neil, Mr. Cook, to that meeting as well. He came, we had a good conversation just to make sure that we heard and understood what his concerns were since he was bringing them to all of you. We have reviewed this document with him and with the HEAT group, Healthy Environment Action Team, at their last meeting last week. Because that topic has come up in that group quite a bit as well. So I thought maybe Neil would be here today to speak on it, but certainly we tried to value his input and follow up on the concerns that he had. And I think we've done the best we can to kind of address that. I don't know that it's meeting maybe all the expectations. But I think where we're at is these are legislative changes that need to take place and aren't necessarily authorities that we feel we have here locally to address some of this stuff. So hopefully we can if there's interest in following up on this, some of that energy may need to be directed in other directions than what we have direct control of here. So that could be legislative change if that's where everyone feels this should go. So, and yeah, questions.
Mike.
First off, I really like the report. It's very helpful. I just wanted to clarify one part. I know Neil would be talking about percolation rates. But from this, it looks like you can't look at that alone. It's the H2O holding power and all kinds of stuff. So did Neil understand that before, or is this something new?
I think it's kind of honing in. I mean, the percolation rate is absolutely part of what's considered. And then there's kind of the question of data scale. When you're looking at a map, there's always the question of scale. And so from the state code, working in natural resources, we know black and white is a very rare thing, and basically everything is some shade of gray. And this is kind of a great example of that. With Neil's map, he has the color map of like the red to green and percolation, good, excellent, whatnot. When you're looking at soils, so in state code, what is explicitly called out is sandy loam and loamy sand. Now, loamy sand is something that can't be spread on. It has that percolation rate that is too high. It can be if it meets all of those other restrictions underneath. Sandy loam can be spread on. If you look at them on a map, they're like this. They are touching each other. And when you're looking at a data set that is made for the entire nation, those lines are not down to the inch in the field. They can shift 100, 500 feet any which way because the scale is just not there for that kind of data. And so when you're zooming in onto scale specific questions, you need to have scale specific, field specific data in order to make an educated guess there. And so the percolation rate's definitely important, but yes, it's not the only thing by a long shot.
So is the land that's being spread on, is that checked every year for nutrients, or is there any kind of that they go out and check the land to see if it's gone up or down or whatever?
With the nutrient management aspect of it, which is where I believe that would fall, they're supposed to submit a checklist to us every year and then do soil tests for that nutrient concentration every 4 years. So.
And is Dunn County the only place that will take the like raw sewage in? Is there other ones in Dunn County?
As far as like a municipal
Yeah.
plant, yeah, right now the city of Menominee is the only one that would take,
Okay.
right, direct stuff.
And they can keep up with the amount coming in pretty good?
As far as we know, they can, but I
Okay.
think it depends on that quantity. So when you have 11,000 potential tanks or, in the county,
Yep.
and you add that to, if we were to, because the question has been, we should ban land application of septage, right?
Mhm.
And okay, what happens to that waste? Well, then it would have to go through a wastewater treatment plant. So city of Menominee. Now, not all of it would come to city of Menominee. Some might go outside of the county. But if you add those all online, I'm not sure where that actually sits, but the reality then is, and this is part of our conversation here, is what happens in a wastewater treatment plant, a municipal plant? Well, the water and the solids are separated out, nutrients are concentrated, and they're put into a sludge. That sludge is then stored in tanks and then eventually is land applied. It's land applied on a much smaller scale and localized area than human septage is across the county. So those are considerations that probably need some more discussion around if that's where things would need to go. But right now, I'm aware that the city of Menominee's, sites that are available for land application are very limited. So when you concentrate this, the nutrients and whatever other, substances are part of that sludge, it's being put on a smaller acreage of land, potentially in areas that aren't best suited for it, but they are following the rules that are applied for them. So we talk about an onion and what layer you want to peel today. I mean, that's kind of what it is. Yeah.
One last note, with regard to reporting on this, the farmer has to stick with the NR 151 and nutrient management. The appliers have to submit gallons spread and where it was spread every year. And so that's why in this one I have the 2024 numbers, but they have to submit that to the DNR every year.
And we don't necessarily get those numbers every year. This is the most data that we can find on record, that Heather's been able to obtain. So we have the sites that are approved as of today, basically, or in the last month. That could change as maybe new sites come online. But at least we have an idea now internally, and Heather mentioned this earlier, when we're working with landowners on nutrient management planning, we have an idea of, we should be asking what we always do now, ask the questions, are other nutrients that are applied to this land, and get that incorporated into your nutrient management plan. But we have a little bit more tools now to follow up to confirm what land is actually approved for septage.
I know that, yeah, I agree that, by the way, this is really helpful report. Thank you, both of you. In the past, when long distance past, when we looked at this, staff expressed frustration that it was difficult to get this level of detail about Dunn County situation from DNR records. How did you find it? Was it?
We have part of the meeting that Chase mentioned. The DNR staff person in charge of doing the approvals was actually online. He zoomed in with us. And so there's just been a really good line of direct communication between him, me, his supervisors, and a whole slew of miscellaneous DNR staff. I do not know their org chart and I don't pretend to, but there's a lot of DNR people on there. But the site-specific data came directly from the person who does the approvals and whatnot for this.
And will we be able to get that in the future on a regular basis if we need it?
I would think so. I don't want to guarantee anything, but it definitely didn't take too much work.
That's great.
On that end.
Without objection from the committee, I know that some people there may be some people here who have a particular interest in this topic. Would it be okay if I ask if anyone in the audience has any comments they want to make? Is there anyone here who would have information they want to share on this or questions? Okay. All right. Just to make sure. Thanks a lot. Okay. Thank you.
That's it.
That's great. Thanks a lot. Now what we've all been waiting for, the presentation on the 2026 wage proposal. Dan, are you going to do this? No.
There's nothing like that introduction. I am now nervous, so thank you. Okay, so let me share my screen here.
Why don't you introduce yourself? And yeah. Okay.
All right, well, thank you for having us. My name is Sarah Stansberry. I'm the Talent Development Manager in the HR department. And if you're wondering what that means or what I do all day, I oversee some different program areas within HR, largely performance management, training and development, and then recruitment and retention. So we are here to talk today about performance updates and the 2026 wage proposal. It's still very much in the proposal stage. Right now, we are going around to committee meetings and sharing this information and trying to explain a little bit of the why this proposal is happening, and also to essentially answer questions, seek feedback and input. So we'll start by talking about performance management because it does tie into how wages have been proposed for next year. So early on in 2025, performance management really rose to the top as an area within the county that we needed to focus on. We knew that we needed to equip managers and leaders, and we've been working on that for a couple of years. But specifically, what I'm talking about is the actual performance evaluation system. And so it was set as a priority by county leadership, county manager, and department heads. And when we looked at the process that we were using, we found that actually it was really cumbersome and not doing what we wanted it to do. And in getting feedback from department heads and also employees, finding that they shared in those opinions. And so knowing that we needed to overhaul how we were administering evaluations. So when we looked at a new way of doing this, we had a few goals. The first was really keeping the focus on regular ongoing feedback from managers to employees. We know that employees who receive that regular feedback are 3.6 times more likely to be engaged in the workplace. And we know that employees who are engaged in the workplace are 37% less likely to leave. So it's really a retention issue at the core of it. We also wanted to find a simple system. I mentioned the old process. It was pretty cumbersome. It was a lot of steps. And also balancing that simple system with accountability. And at the end of the day, just keeping it about employees and managers connecting with one another, because the most important thing is not filling out a form. That's never going to change someone's performance. The most important thing is actually engaging with each other. So we needed a system that would work everywhere across the county, all the way from the sheriff's office to ENS to NDC. And we know that those operations and their needs are very different, and wanted to give managers the flexibility within that system to kind of mold it as they see fit and make it the most useful and tailored to their team's needs. And then lastly, we've done the employee satisfaction survey 2 years in a row now. So we did it in 2024. We did it again in May of 2025. And both times, some of the areas where we score higher in disagreement, so where employees are disagreeing with these statements, are having regular check-ins with their manager holding employees accountable, and then my annual performance evaluations help me identify areas for growth and improvement. So again, at the end of the day, really a retention and satisfaction tool. So this process launched for the first time July 1st. Managers went through training on it in May, and it will happen every quarter from here on out. So how this looks is the manager will prepare for the conversation. They will have the conversation with the employee, and then there's a quick form for them to fill out in our software system that's called NeoGov. And that form has a rating, and it has a space for them to provide a summary about the conversation. It's really meant to, that part of the process is meant to be quick for them to do. And then once the form is filled out, everyone who needs to have visibility to it can, all the way from the employee to their manager to their manager's manager. And that helps us with training and support to provide what's needed to managers to help coach them. And then HR can also report on these forms and audit them. So again, we can see how this is going and where we might need that training. So if you look at the white sheet that was handed out to you, this is part of a performance check-in guide that was provided to managers. It's also been provided to employees. And this guide is really meant to be like, if you were to ask me what the best practice is for a performance check-in, we would say it would have these components. Not that managers have to address each every time, but that this is where they might start looking to assess performance. So at the very top of that page, you see performance ratings. We are moving to a 3 rating system. And the first rating is exceeds expectations. That's really someone who's going above and beyond. They take initiative, they're high impact, they're adding significant value, and really there are no areas that are requiring improvement. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Meets expectations is an employee whose performance is solid, reliable, dependable. They are an efficient and effective contributor to the team. This is where we want for everyone to be. This is a very good rating and where we would expect most employees to fall. There may be areas for growth in this area. There may be areas for growth in exceeds expectations too. We are not saying that you can't ever learn anything or have anything to learn. We want to have that kind of culture. What we're saying is in these top 2 categories that there are no areas that have to be addressed that are urgent. The last category is needs improvement. And in this area, this is someone whose performance doesn't meet expectations. Gaps are evident, they're significant, they're recurring, they've already, we've already tried to address them. And the performance can't continue on this way without some sort of intervention. That would be like a performance improvement plan or disciplinary action. So examples of that might be someone who has an attendance issue or has trouble collaborating at work and it's repeated and it's having an impact on the workplace. Are there questions about performance so far, or should we keep going? Okay. Are you doing this part?
Sarah, I do,
Okay.
I do have a question.
Yes.
So as we're talking about this, I assume then that everyone gets evaluated?
Yeah.
With the county manager being evaluated by the board? Executive committee, okay. So someone that's doing the evaluations has done a bunch of evaluations and their boss, I'll put it in those terms, looks at their work and the boss has been supervising these people all year long. Now, I'm talking about supervision versus evaluation, and those are different. Supervision being the day-to-day interactions that you'd have with an employee. Is that correct, the way you're looking at it? And evaluation is the actual sitting down with them and writing it up.
We would say that the person who is supervising the day-to-day work is the most appropriate person to assess performance. Does that answer your question? No.
No, yes, just so that we have a difference. We know what supervision means versus evaluation.
Mhm.
And you just kind of said that. And I asked about, is everyone going to be evaluated? And you said yes, so
Yes.
you did answer my questions.
Okay, thank you.
Do all the managers feel that it's feasible for them to be meeting with their employees 4 times a year in this context?
No. It's been really interesting, kind of watching managers grapple with how this looks in their work areas. We would say that if you want to build a highly effective team, you have to do this. There's really no way out of this. But there are some areas where we've got 40 people reporting to one manager. And those are the areas where like we've worked with those folks to figure out what is more realistic in their area. So in every area, the October check-in is required. In the areas where there are those really high volume staff, we've looked at, does twice a year make sense? Things like that.
Okay, thank you.
But I think part of that and one of the goals is that ongoing conversation with employees. And that is, if you're only doing an October review, that should not be when somebody found out for the last 8 months they've been doing something wrong. They need to know about that when it happens. So that's where you get into that conversation around supervising. Like that is supervising. That's having that conversation when those items occur so that the employee is aware of that. And if you continue to have that conversation with them, when you get to the evaluation component, it is not a surprise. So I think that's where we want all of those conversations to happen. And those check-ins are times where an employee can see that being documented so that they are aware that, this is a serious issue or where that issue kind of falls in that scale.
For across much of the organization, check-ins are already happening regularly, and the goal was not like, let's burden you down with all this extra work. When we talk about this performance check-in, we're looking for like 5 sentences from the manager about like how the conversation go. And so I wouldn't call it fast feedback, but it's meant to be that ongoing feedback. When we look historically at performance data from the last 5 years, we were only having about 20% of employees have an evaluation. And that's a problem because how could they possibly know where they stand if they don't have that feedback? So
Is there a level of self-evaluation that goes into this?
managers can implement that. They can choose to. When we sat down, we met with department managers a couple times, and it's really interesting when you ask a group of 20 people for their opinions, you'll get 80 answers. And so some people felt really strongly about a self-evaluation, some people did not. And the compromise that we came to was if you want to include that in your process, you're welcome to, and you can attach it to the form, but we are not going to require that where it doesn't make sense for certain positions that are, they're 0.2 FTE. They work maybe a weekend a month, and are we really going to require that of them?
One last one. Being able to supervise people and to evaluate people is not a skill everybody has. Is there going to be continuing and ongoing training for folks, not just if this is implemented, but continually?
So I would start off with, and I think you went over it, we've been doing training with our managers for about 2 years now, kind of preparing for doing these evaluations or these check-ins over time. And the intent would be to continue that and to continue to focus on building our management team's knowledge and skill set in management. I think we've talked a lot about that's not something that a lot of people go to school for. They go to school or they have a career in doing things. Chase is a water conservation person who's now a manager, and he has to learn how to be a manager. Same with all of our managers. So yes, that is something that we've been focusing on, and you as a board added a position about a year ago to really be able to focus on the training of our managers and our employees in exactly that.
We also, so we've provided that training to managers, and the intention is this fall that we will also provide training to employees on how to give feedback, because we know part of this is about employees being able to come to the table and share with their manager how things are really going. It's a skill, exactly like you said. And the other part of this that I would say is a lot of the learning is in the doing. And we have managers all over the county that are doing this well and that are really strong and solid. And part of it is giving them opportunities to network and connect with each other so that they can share best practices of like, hey, this is what's working in my area. How's it working in yours, right? So it's training, but also connection and practice. Yeah.
The question I have is for employees that you need to improve. Sometimes you have to go back and say, hey, it's been like 4 or 5 times, that you haven't improved. So you have some record to go back on if there is action that has to be taken. But then if you're meeting once every 4 times a year, you got something to go back, say, hey, this has been going on and hasn't straightened itself out.
That's exactly, I think, a part of the documentation of that is when we do get into those types of scenarios that we have that documentation. We know that the employee has been made aware of that. And should there be any challenges to that, we have that documentation to limit the county's liability in those instances.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Also, like, it is fair to let it's fair to let employees know where they stand and to give them concrete steps of how do I get from here to here, right? Being clear is what's kind.
before we get into the connection to the pay increase, you've told us the pros of this kind of system. Tell me the cons too, because there's got to be both sides. I'd like to hear what you think about it.
I mean, I would say that, probably the only con that I can come up with is it's time consuming, right? In having those conversations, scheduling those meetings with your employees, the time to, as we talk about the form that we have to fill out, the form is literally a drop-down box and a sentence, right? So we intended to try and make that as minimal as it was. Our old process was pretty complex and would, I don't know, if you really sat down to go do it, maybe hour to finish a review for an employee. So that's something that we've tried to speed up. But I think that's the only con that I can really find, because I guess I just feel like it is that important to make sure that employees know where they stand and how they are doing with their job, good, bad, or indifferent, to have those conversations and to make sure that they are aware of where they stand.
It probably depends who you ask. And so I would say, like, from the management group, we're hearing this is going to be hard. It's going to be hard to tell someone you're here, and it's really uncomfortable. And the growing pains of doing that, at first, it is going to be really uncomfortable, especially if the conversations haven't been happening. And eventually, we hope to have that culture of feedback. When we look at, so we did the kind of process improvement groups here, and then did some research about, okay, what are other employers doing? Like, what kind of nationally are the best practices? And a lot of them are going to a model like this that's more that continuous feedback, because they realize that once a year is just not enough. It is really only one slice of a snapshot. And I tried to look for why we should keep doing annual evaluations, and I came up really short on it because there are a lot of drawbacks to that system.
All right. So obviously we're going around to all of the committees to talk about this, and so the reason that we're doing that is there's going to be some changes to ordinance and other things that are going to be going to the full board. This is complex, and so we wanted to give you an opportunity to ask these questions in a smaller format. So just so you're aware, these are changes that'll be going to, a lot of them will be starting with the Committee on Administration a week from yesterday, and will be hitting the board for the first time in the July meeting. So just helping you kind of be informed of what those changes are. You should still read all of the changes and the ordinance changes and all of that. This is mainly a summary of what we're suggesting to change and why. So biggest change is to remove the steps from the step system. So as you're probably familiar, we have 25 grades. So each position kind of falls in a grade, and And within those grades, there's 11 steps for every, as you kind of move through that process. So we're suggesting to remove the steps, not the grades. So we'd still have grades. So a position would have a minimum and a maximum kind of salary. And then, but there wouldn't be the small steps, the increments within that process. And then we are also proposing then to have the 2026 or starting in 2026 pay increase be based on performance, using that performance check-in process that we had just kind of discussed. So, and we kind of put in here is really around allowing flexibility in those adjustments. So if our current step system, each step is a 2.75% increase from the previous one. So when we talk about giving an employee a step, you're giving them a 2.75% raise. And your options of the board, or our options to make proposals to you are 2.75 or 0 when we talk about steps, right? So when I talk about giving you flexibility, removing of that step says, oh, we can't afford 2.75, but we can afford 2. We can afford 1. Whatever kind of, wherever we really can afford within that scale allows us that flexibility to make those recommendations to the board, and for you as a board to make any changes to that, kind of whether it's up 0.5% or 1/4%. Right now, your options are 2.75 or 0, or 5.5, I guess, or on up the scale. So, so that's when we talk about flexibility. That's really what we're kind of getting at there. How the performances would be evaluated. So the current ordinance says an employee would receive a step based on funding if they have a satisfactory annual evaluation. So what that kind of means in this current system, or as you look at it here, is that's kind of meeting expectations, right? A satisfactory review somewhat aligns around with meeting expectations. So as we get back into the performance check-in process, we did not have a large amount of employees that were receiving an annual review to start with. So part of this focus is we need to do that. Our ordinance requires us to be able to do that in order for employees to receive steps. So we are focusing on that, and that was kind of part of that change is how can we make this more doable for managers and employees. So what does this look like for our raises? So 2 kind of big changes as it relates to this. So the first one being needs improvement. So someone who needs improvement would not receive a raise. As we went through those rating areas, people who need improvement require improvement. So this is someone who is not meeting the bar. That is somewhat different from what we had seen before. Cost of living adjustments, as we had done them before, would apply to someone who needs improvement. So this is a little bit different where they would not even receive a cost of living adjustment in that. The meets expectations. So once again, this is likely to be the bulk of employees would receive in this case. And this is a 2026 proposal. So percentages can change. So we're not recommending to change the ordinance to say 2.75 and 3.25. The ordinance change is going to say we're going to remove the step system, and the county manager will make a recommendation to the Committee on Administration, and the board will essentially do that. So on a year-to-year basis, we'll be setting these percentages. So this is just the 2026 change or recommendation. So meeting expectations would receive a 2.75% increase, and then those employees that are exceeding expectations would receive a 3.25. So an additional half step for those employees, or 0.5% for those employees that are seen to be exceeding expectations. And the math gets fun here in the end. So one of the things that had come up as we ran this through the Committee on Administration last month was, what about those people at what we currently call step 11, which is our top step, or those that are meeting, that are at the top of our pay scale. So what we're recommending is to have those that exceed expectations that are at the top of our scale. They would move up with the market adjustment. So as that maximum goes up, they're going to keep up with that maximum. And then we are going to make sure that they get that 3.25% increase, but they'll receive a lot of that or some of that in the form of a bonus. So of a one-time payment. So their base pay will not go higher than the maximum, but they will receive some compensation for exceeding expectations in a bonus or in a lump sum payment that would total 3.25% over the year. So that's something that's new. Currently, our employees that are at the max of our scale do not receive steps. They only receive that cost of living adjustment. So this is kind of giving them a little bit of an incentive to continue to exceed expectations in the future. So so I think the two big changes are the needs improvements and the exceeds are things that we hadn't done in the past. Everybody kind of got that meets expectations change. So what you won't see here, and I talk about market adjustments and cost of living, that's kind of built into that 2.75%. So you can kind of look at that 2.75% as we're going with about 2.25% cost of living. So that's about how much we would see those changes to be happening. And then an additional 0.5% for what would have been the step in the old system. Yep.
I think I'm getting thrown off by the word one time in this asterisk.
Yep.
So, because that's kind of sounding like to me, if you're maxed out, you're maxed out, you're not going to get any more bonuses, but that's not what you're saying.
Correct. We were going to change that because this is not the first time we heard that.
Okay.
It is not one time ever. It is you're just going to receive that in one lump sum in that year. Yes, the next year you would also qualify for a lump sum.
Okay.
and going forward.
Thank
Yes.
you. Appreciate that.
Yep. Any other questions related to that?
So when they get up to that top step that they don't have no more,
Mhm.
are they gonna get like money or are they gonna get like time off? Have you worked that out yet?
So it would be money.
Okay.
So yeah, they would receive essentially that 2.25% cost of living. And I just want to clarify that it isn't actually 2.25. We kind of do it off of the middle of the scale. So it doesn't exactly come out to that, but it's somewhere around that number. But then that additional amount that they would have received annually, they will receive as cash, well, taxable cash, but.
Have you received any concerns from employees about this change?
I mean, in general, this isn't 4.75% increase that they have received in the past. Outside of that, I think employees have not. I think we've been surprised. So as Sarah and Jenna and I have been going around department to department talking to employees about these changes and receiving their feedback. And I think a lot of it has been very welcomed. And we can kind of get into that. And I think the exceeding expectations component being new is something that employees are encouraged about. Employees really want that performance check-in and to kind of know where they stand. I would say managers are the people who are getting the work here and having those hard conversations. So I think from employees outside of the not getting 4.75%, I think they are okay with that. There's a component of the steps and looking at that step scale and knowing where you're going to be next year. And I think there's a little bit of concern regarding that, but we know in the last 10 years, there's been 2 years that steps were not provided. So having that expectation isn't necessarily a good thing because it isn't always true. Right. And so that's where I say with this flexibility allows us to kind of be able to find the Goldilocks point as it relates to those step increases or those performance increases. You can see Mike going for it.
Well, now the same question I had before, now that we've tied the evaluation process, which I really like, to money, what are the pros and cons? Because there are some cons now.
Yeah, so, this puts work on managers and it requires managers to effectively evaluate their employees, and have those conversations and let employees know where they land. And those are not fun conversations, and they're not always necessarily received well. So that can lead to maybe a little bit of angst, if you will. But I would argue that some of that is healthy, and that's where we say that, having those conversations and making sure that everybody knows where everybody stands is good. And we talk about those quarterly reviews as well. The intent around those reviews is you can kind of set that ground and say, hey, I have you meeting expectations. These are the things that you can do to get to exceed, because that October evaluation is the one that would impact this pay. So it helps employees kind of know where they stand and build that process forward. But certainly, yes, there's.
Well, I'm looking more of it from the employee.
Mhm.
You're kind of telling me there's a lot more work and so forth. And the employee has to look at it in a different way than that. So there must be some cons. I mean, I've read material and
Yeah.
there's pros and cons. It's 50-50. This is nothing new.
Yep.
This has been going on for 40 years at least. So what are the employees? What's the cons from their point of view?
They are, I would say, some of them a little bit worried about whether my manager will accurately assess my performance. And so we've worked hard to create a framework around the language that we would use to describe these expectations. And on the back of your white sheet, you have, it's called a core values rubric. The board adopted these core values back in the fall. And so we've given some behavioral indicators of, what we would see as needing improvement, meeting expectations, exceeding expectations. So again, hopefully that shared language around some of these things. I would also say, we hear from employees, what if my manager doesn't fill out the form? Then what? What if they don't give me a performance evaluation or a performance check-in? And we would say that is where being able to report and audit this process, then it becomes a management issue, an issue of the manager's performance. We will not penalize employees for a manager not filling out a form. I think just in general, everyone does see things a little bit differently. But at the end of the day, we would say it is the manager's job to assess. Sure. Right. So what Chris was saying is, if an employee looks at wanting to exceed expectations, the thought that, okay, I have to do more and more and more and more. And every quarter I have to do more and I have to take on more just so I can maintain this exceeds expectations rating. And we would say that is not how we look at it. And we've communicated that both to employees and managers. And that's why the core values are so important, because it's not about doing more. It's about how you show up for work. And are you bringing your best self to work? We would see that as exceptional.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. You did a nice job explaining. What I would like to see in any kind of evaluation system in general is if I am evaluated any one of those quarters and I disagree with the facts or disagree with my supervisor, I should be able to put in a statement in my evaluation that says, I disagree with this for this reason. And I understand that you've talked about it.
Yeah.
But that seems really important to me.
So, and that's where I think we want to focus on that conversation. So, the intent around that is, and employees will have the ability to see these evaluations that were written around them, is in that conversation, if I shared with you, like, you're not meeting the mark on X, and you came back and said, I believe I am, and we're going to agree to disagree, right? So if that conversation was had, first of all, we need to get over that as a as an employee manager type relationship. But that would be captured within that evaluation. That the manager would write how they feel about that, and that the employee provided feedback that they did not agree with that, and we will be continuing to work on that as we go forward, and the employee would be able to see that.
Being able to see what the supervisor wrote later might not be what they talked about.
So
That's just the way communication works in the world.
Yep.
So that's not going to cover it in the situation where the employee says, that's not what we talked about. Or that they need to have a way to say something so that it's on their record. I'm just putting that out there.
Yep.
And I do have one final one. That's for you and Dan and Chris. I know one of Chris's letters stated something like, if an employee comes to a supervisor, please refer them to us. I took that to mean, don't talk to any employees. And that seems really strange that I can't talk to a constituent. I don't know if that's the way it was meant to be, but I took it to be that way. Did you guys also tell the employees the same thing, not to talk to supervisors?
So you could certainly talk to your constituents. I think that conversation is really about, or that comment is really around, there's a lot of things that go on with an employee's work and how they're being evaluated and how they work with their manager. And the one-sided conversation that you would receive from an employee doesn't necessarily provide the full scope of that. And if there is a conversation that if an employee came to talk to you, I think we would encourage you to come talk to us, me, Chris, about that, and so that we can kind of have that full conversation around that, as opposed to having that in an open meeting type situation.
Yeah, I guess you should trust the supervisors a little more to make some decisions. If somebody comes to me and says, my supervisor did this and this, well, that's strictly administration.
Mhm.
It had nothing to do with that. But when there's a large thing that changes the entire thing like this, and changes the entire outlook and changes, they should be able to come to us and say, I disagree with this because this and this. And we should be able to make the decision to say, yeah, you got to go back, talk to your supervisor about that. That's a personnel issue. Or I understand that you don't like this entire system. Thank you for giving me your feedback.
Right.
So
I would agree with your statement there, and I think that's kind of, it may be written in not using the right words, but I would agree that yes, some of those conversations are, as you talk about employees, and that kind of that general scope of, I don't like this change. I think that is something that you could have those conversations with those employees. But yeah, as you get into the my manager doesn't like me type things, that's where I think we need to kind of go through those other channels as employee-based channels. So I would agree with your statement.
So what I'm hearing is that if supervisors want to gather feedback from employees, we may have that conversation about this policy in general.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
We got, over the time, we've had some different, like, supervisors come in over the years, And sometimes their perspective of the employee is going to be completely different than the one that just left. You know, I mean, so how are you going to work that out and still be fair to the employee?
So I think a part of that is having this centralized documentation of all of these reviews. That's something that didn't exist before. So as a new manager came on, they typically had like no record of what that relationship or any conversations that the previous manager was having with that employee. So I think from an onboarding a new manager, they have material at their fingertips to kind of understand how that previous manager had worked with them. So I think we hope that that'll be better. There certainly are situations where a new manager is going to come in and evaluate an employee different. They have a new different vision about how they see that department working. They need to have those conversations with those employees and kind of resetting those expectations. I would have a concern if we had an employee that was meeting and a new manager put them at needing like right away, right? That to me is like, no, I don't know that we've had enough time to evaluate that. And so that's a component of that as we talk about, I think it was in here that HR will be auditing these evaluations, and by audit I mean not looking at everyone, but a sampling of that. But I think in situations where a new manager comes in, we'll look at those and kind of target that specific to make sure that we're looking to see how that transition is happening. Ultimately, employee and manager and all of the employees in a department need to work together. They're a team. And that's where we talk about having those conversations and having everybody on the same page is really important. So
I just wanted to go back to the question about whether employees have an opportunity to respond to what's in the performance check-in. So managers are building this out in different ways for themselves. We've heard from public health, for example, that they intend to write out the narrative and send it to the employee before actually submitting it and to get their feedback about, hey, do you have anything to add? We would always encourage managers to do that. The other piece of this is, yes, we do want for the focus to be on conversation and coming to the table. We do have the ability that if after the form is submitted, an employee wants to add context or feedback about it, we can upload a document with their perspective to an employee file. So there is the ability to do that, but we have worked really, really hard to communicate to managers that the check-in form, the narrative is meant to be reflective, not just of what they said, not just of what they thought, but also including the other, side of the other perspective there. When we looked at the process, the biggest hangup in actually getting evaluations completed was the employee portion, because we had employees not completing that part, and then we're out of compliance with the ordinance. And so there's a weighing that goes on there too, of allowing for that feedback and opportunity, but also meeting the requirements that we have as an organization. So I just wanted to share that.
So prior to an evaluation, the employee receives a copy of the format that's going to be used for the discussion. And do they, it depends upon the supervisor whether or not that's submitted as part of the interview, or whether it's just used by them as.
You've heard from managers that, some managers are like, I'm going to sit with you and type out the form right as we go. You'll see me do it. And so that's that flexibility that we want to allow for. But yes, employees have seen or have been, there's a video shared of what the form looks like, so they know.
So I forget what all the slides are, so I'm sure we've covered 90% of this. So so some of the why, I talked a little bit about the flexibility of the step system, and the restrictions that allows, or that has, that you can only choose that 2.75 or 0. And so adding a little bit of that, and then really the fiscal side of that, as we talk about what can we as a county afford. So 2% cost of living plus steps amounts to about 4.75%. That's a pretty good raise. As we look at competitors, as we look at private industry around us, 4.75% is on the high end of what we're seeing in the market. And we do contract with a company who provides us some of this information, so we kind of have a feel for where we fall there. From a total salary standpoint, 4.75% increase is about $2 million. So obviously, you're somewhat familiar with our county finances. It's a large amount of money. And that doesn't mean that that's all levy funded. That there's certainly grants funded. You know, the state's given us some money for 3 positions, well, two positions now, in land and water rights. So some of that gets absorbed by those other funding mechanisms, but that's a large amount. And I think this statistic, I think, as you asked some questions, Supervisor Kinnear, we had 25% of our employees in our satisfaction survey cite some level of dissatisfaction with the compensation that they've received. And so we look at a 4.75% increase, which is on the high end of the market, and say, how can that be? And now, recognizing the fact that everybody always wants more money, we really wanted to kind of dig into that and say, why, like, what is the problem with this compensation? We feel like we're giving you something that's really good. Can you help us understand why that's a problem? And not everyone, but the large voice that we heard in having those conversations was, it wasn't so much about the compensation that an employee was receiving. It was that one of their peers was receiving the same amount, right? It's that I come to work, I am happy, friendly, I'm picking up an extra shift here and there, helping everybody out, and, you know, all around being a great employee. This person comes in as a grumpy Gus and nobody wants to be around them, and they're receiving the same amount as me. That's where I have a problem with the compensation that I'm receiving. So as we talk about that exceeding expectations, that's really what we wanted to try and capture, this 25% of our employees having that dissatisfaction with that. What can we do in order to kind of bring that down and help our employees feel better about coming to work and how we are compensating them for that? So that's part of our reasoning behind that. Certainly, you know, everything can go every way. So
I'm just chuckling as I talked to a business, and they said they gave everybody the same raise and they got complaints because of the same exact thing. So now they're going back to giving them separate raises, which they got complaints before that because the other people were getting different raises. So you can't win. I get it.
Yep. So yeah, and then obviously the need for meaningful, effective performance management and accountability is a concern. So these are other things from our satisfaction survey where there was a question or a statement in our satisfaction survey that says, my manager treats me well, and you know, and we have a great relationship, and that one scored very high. And then there was another question that says, my manager holds others accountable, and that scored very low. So when you look at those two questions, right, that kind of feeds into that, you know, we come back to that managers is, you know, our managers managing in employees, as we look at that, are saying, no, they're not recognizing, you know, the efforts that I'm putting in, or that person isn't doing that. There's a whole lot of discretion that comes into that, but I do think that there's a level of, that's why we pay managers to do that. And it is a difficult job. And it is very difficult to do it well. But that's why we're training them, and that's why we're continuing to work on that. And we talk about practice and having that, because a piece of managers also coming in is like, why would I give somebody meets expectations and this person exceeds expectations? All I'm going to do is make them mad. There's no when there's no wage difference to that. There's not. You're just making somebody mad or telling them where they fit, and it doesn't go there. So having that little motivation of that, in this case, 0.5%, helps them kind of really think through whether they want to make that decision or not, or how they're going to reward those employees. All right. Go.
Yeah,
Yep.
I apologize if this is repetitive, but are the cost of living adjustments still going to be moving forward on top of as usual?
Yeah, so they're kind of built into that, to that percentage. And so that's where, like, if you look at 2.75, we're really looking at that as about a 2.25% cost of living plus a 0.5% performance increase. So that the grid will move up about 2.5 or 2.25%.
So if I'm rated needs improvement, there will be no cost of living
Correct.
adjustment for that. Okay, thanks.
So we kind of get into that fiscal side of this, and as we get into that, this is kind of the first component of that as we look at getting ready to do the budget here. It starts very soon, and getting our evaluation of what we should do for a cost of living, and what are those wages like, and then how much money are we going to have available. That's where, as we looked at that, we were really struggling with 4.75%, knowing that 2% cost of living is a very important thing. That's the only thing that gets a raise for our people on the top of the scale. And it also keeps us in that market for new employees that sets that bottom level as well. So we know we have to kind of do that cost of living and keep up with the market in that regard. And so then you get into that 2.75, and can we afford that 2.75? And that's where we said, I don't know if we can. I don't know if I can make that recommendation and tell the board, like, yeah, we can afford it, because I think it's on the high end of what we can afford. So just kind of getting into that net new construction as we talk. You've heard this all a lot, right? Our levy, it gets to increase at about 1.47%. Right? So it's a very small amount. So you talk about a 4.75% increase while our levy is going up 1.47. The math has some problems. Obviously, the levy isn't funding all of our positions. There's other sources of revenue that kind of come in there. So just wanted to go over a little bit of this. So this is a historical look at total salary cost. Lots of numbers on this, but it does go over what we did year in, year out. So in 2020, we provided 2% plus a step, and our total salary and fringe costs was about 36 million. So that number on the top, that's our total salary costs. And then that number down at the bottom, that 212,000, that's the amount of levy increase that happened that year. So that's that net new construction as it goes in. So as you go to 2021, you can see another 2%, no steps that year. The next year, there's a bit of a jump, and put in there, we added some DHS transit lease staff. So it was essentially a shift from an expenditure to an operation expense to a salary and fringe expense. But you can see those salary costs kind of bump up a little bit there. So some of that is accounted for by those additional employees. So you can see that went up. So that 5.1 million, that's how much it went up from year to year. So that was that 5% adjustment. So that was the total comp. The year that we did the total comp study, we moved everybody to all kinds of different grades and changed things around. So it amounted to everybody getting about a 5% raise in how we did that. The next year we did a 3.5 in a step, 2 in a step, 2 in a step. But you can see how that total cost is climbing at a rate that is difficult to keep up with our revenues. So we wanted to have some flexibility to be able to control those costs and to give you the ability to control those costs. So, and then this is just extrapolating out that data, assuming we did a 2.75%. Well, sorry, the graph is showing the increase at 2 in a step, but you can kind of see what those numbers look like in the middle there. There's what it looks like at a 2.75% increase. So this 50 million, 53 million, 55, 58, 60. So just not climbing at that same rate. And once again, that 2.75% is a number that you would be able to move based on finances available or market or whatever that might be, not having that limitation of the 2.75 or nothing. So you can see the difference in, call it savings, but it's not savings. No, it saves us the expense, but we still have to find that revenue to be able to cover those increases. So this is a little bit of the reason why, as we look at that, to say we need to give you, the board, me, the person who has to make the recommendations, the tools to be able to find that right number. Like I said, that Goldilocks point of what is an appropriate amount to give people on an annual basis that we can afford. No questions, I was gonna say.
All this is assuming that we maintain the exact same services we have.
That does, yes. Yep.
Okay, and we have this new study coming up.
Yep.
That may change that. Who knows? Okay.
So, yeah, I mean,
that's just a comment.
I mean, yes, I mean, that is, managing those costs is really about, controlling our operational revenues, but also making determinations around the programs and services that we provide and the levels that we provide them. And the programs that we provide and the levels that we provide them, that is solely within the Board of Supervisors, discretion to be able to make those determinations. Obviously, we can provide that information so that you can make informed decisions about that. And that's where I would say this is just that. So that priority-based budgeting is what you're referring to. That tool, along with this, I think, is giving you more control to be able to right-size things. And then just kind of going through our communication plan. So you all received the email that all employees received that had a video that kind of goes over what that compensation or what that performance plan looks like and what these changes are. I mentioned before, Jenna and Sarah and I have been meeting with every department. Our last one is today. We got the highway department here later today. It's going to be fun. And so but those are the committee meetings. So we're doing that as well. So we're meeting with every one of the departments, all of the staff, to kind of go over these changes, to answer any questions that they may have and help them understand, what these recommendations, because at this point they are recommendations. So this is something that the board could say, no, we don't want to do this. We want to do 2% in steps, and we'll do that. And then we'll come back and tell all the staff, never mind. And that's fine. They won't be upset about 4.75%, I guarantee it. Well, 25% of the, so we are doing that just to make sure that we're bringing them along so that they are aware of all of the changes that are happening. And then you receive the county manager emails, but we're continuing to keep them up to date on any of the changes that are happening related to this so that they know all of the changes that 3 weeks ago, it was 2.5%. We've increased it to 2.75%. We added that bonus for the people at the max that exceeded expectations based on the feedback from the Committee on Administration. So we're continuing to evolve this and continuing to communicate any of those changes back to employees. So then once November comes around, the budget's been adopted and the October reviews have been completed, we're going to provide all employees with an individual compensation statement. So the breakdown of how much they're paid right now and what that will look like next year. And that'll include all of those additional costs, including like their health insurance premiums and WRS and other items that are a part of their compensation package. And then following into January, then we're going to have some town hall sessions and receive some of that feedback from employees about how did it go, right? How did your manager do? And having those conversations, how did you feel about those reviews, the compensation statements, all of that? Receive all of that feedback and continue to provide support to employees as they go through that. And then the plan as it would kind of go forward with the changes to the personnel ordinance, which is going to have a different name, is sometime around that April-May timeframe. Jenna and I will be making a presentation to the Committee on Administration to say, in looking at the information that we receive from our third party, we feel like this is where we should set those raises for 2027. Kind of get the Committee on Administration's semi-adoption of that, and that will be what will start our 2027 budget process. So that's kind of part of that as personnel costs are a big portion of our budget. We like to kind of set those areas ahead of time so that we're building our budget based on at least those expectations. And then do I have more slides? I have the core values rubric, which you have on the back, which is something I think we really are leaning into. And I know it was discussed a little bit in that exceeding expectations is really about how you come to work and how you get along with your peers and how you interact with the public. And it isn't about how many wells did I inspect, right? It's about how did I communicate with that person in the public and my teammates as I went about doing that. I think that's it. Yeah, we got all kinds of slides in there, but
I really like the rubric, the core values rubric piece. That really is, I think, helpful to everybody. And I really like the 3-step process. I've been involved with the evaluation process that had 5 steps, and virtually everybody thought they were 4. And it was impossible to make any kind of real judgment. So this really helps clarify things, I think.
Yeah. And, and that rubric was something that as we, a lot of the feedback that we heard from employees was not so much within department and how employees were going to be evaluated. It was between departments, Chase is going to give everybody an exceeds and Tom is going to give everybody a needs improvement, right? Just because of the personality of those managers. And that's where we wanted to kind of come up with all right, how do you compare 2 people from 2 different departments the same way? And that's where these core values and that core value rubric, that's something that applies to every position. Like if you go through that and you think of any position in the county, those things can apply. Some might be more valuable or more, shine a little bit brighter. We were meeting with the jail staff this morning, and we talked around the professionalism component is a very important aspect as you talk about their work and how they need to go about that. So some of them may weigh differently in different areas, but certainly applies to every position and can help between departments as we evaluate employees.
Any other questions?
Can you just review for me the timeline of the different committees this is going through as it works its way through county board?
Sure.
Thank you.
So next Tuesday, the Committee on Administration will have an action item to approve changes to the personnel ordinance. So that would be forwarding that to the board. Along with that, there's some policies, and the pay plan will be also going to the committee administration to forward to the county board. So every year in September-ish timeframe, September, October timeframe, the board approves the pay plan, which would be like 2% steps or things like that. So there's a recommendation or a resolution to adopt essentially the 2.75 and the 3.25 and the no component. And but it's not going to, it's not going to the committee on admin, but that will be coming to the board in September. So as the committee on administration, if they were to approve those ordinance changes, that would go to the July first reading at the July board meeting.
The July county board meeting.
County board
Okay.
meeting, yep. That'd be the first reading. There is no August board meeting. We have the budget workshop in August. So we'll probably discuss these components as we get into the budget. And then at the September board meeting would be the second reading of the ordinance, which is theoretically when it would be adopted. And along with that would become the pay plan resolutions. And is there any other resolutions coming at that one? Yeah, the benefit plans and all of those things, which is kind of their normal schedule of when they get to the board. And that's for adoption, because then we get into the October meeting of executive is kind of when we finalize that budget for that November timeframe. So when you as a board will see it the first time would be July 30th, with a vote theoretically in September. That's when that second reading would be. So you have a couple of months in the middle there after the first reading to go write up all the amendments that you would have for that.
Is the executive committee involved in this at all?
So trying to think. Not
Okay.
really, no.
So the recommendation goes
yeah.
from admin to,
Yeah.
I just don't know all of the layers.
Yeah.
How it works.
So there's some I hold up on it because the executive committee is the budget committee.
Yeah.
And these are budget impacting, but as it relates to a lot of our personnel items, personnel policies. So typically a policy can be approved by a committee, with the exception of policies that impact the budget. So a lot of our personnel policies have to go to the committee administration and also be adopted by the board, but they don't go through executive for action.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, and then as far as meeting with all of the committees, so obviously we have PR&D today, we have facilities later tonight. We skipped CR&T to save Monica and Tom from having to hear it twice in 2 days. We will be talking about it in executive, so a few of you will get it again. We will be coming to the neighbors tomorrow. And then judiciary and law is essentially after the board, but we have to get to judiciary and law yet. Did I skip one?
Wait, so you will be giving this presentation at exec?
Yes,
Okay, just sort of a.
informative, not as an action
informative,
item, just
like a discussion.
yep,
Okay, and
yep.
that would be on next week?
correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, week from today.
All right.
Yeah. Any other questions? So if you have anything, reach out. Obviously, things are still waiting approval. We're just trying to make sure everybody is informed of those changes, as we know it's a significant change. And want to make sure that you know all the ins and outs before you have to make a vote. All right.
Thank you, Sarah and Dan. And let's see, I think we have nothing under 9 and 10. 11, are there any announcements from anyone? Okay, then our next meeting is August 6th and we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.